A total of 150 guests had been invited to the grand hall of Devonshire Manor that night. The women were dressed in white, pale pink, soft blue, the colors of the season. The men wore black tailcoats, white gloves. Everything was in place, everything as expected, until the doors opened. When Viola Ashton entered, the music did not stop, but it should have, because she was dressed entirely in black. Full mourning attire. Lace collar, long sleeves, not a single ornament, as if she had stepped out of a funeral and walked through the wrong door. But she had not entered the wrong door. The room froze first. Then came the whispers, the kind everyone hears but no one raises their voice to speak. A lady leaned to the one beside her. A gentleman lowered his glass halfway. A group of young women glanced, then quickly looked away. Viola saw none of it, or chose not to see. The difference mattered very much that night. Her head was held high. Her steps were measured. She entered, stopped, and scanned the room, as if searching for something, as if something in that room belonged to her and she had come to take it back. On one of London's brightest nights, she was the darkest figure in the room. And before that night ended, the city would never forget her again. London did not know Viola Ashton, but Edmund Hale did. Edmund Hale, the only son of the Hale family, heir to a modest fortune, well-mannered, well-educated, not particularly brilliant, but dependable. Viola had met Edmund 2 years earlier, at a dinner, an ordinary introduction, an ordinary conversation. But that conversation never truly ended. Letters followed, then walks, then an engagement. For 2 years, Viola planned Edmund's future. Edmund respected every decision Viola made. It was rare for the time, a man who truly listened to a woman. Viola knew that, and she valued him accordingly. Then one morning, the newspaper arrived. Mr. Edmund Hale has married Miss Catherine Ashworth. One line. Small print. Page 3. Viola read that line 3 times. Then she folded the paper, placed it on the table, and never opened it again. No one had told her. Not Edmund, not his family, not a mutual acquaintance, only the newspaper. As if 2 years of her life were not even worth a footnote. Later, they all learned. Everyone did, except Viola. The Hale family was drowning in debt, quietly, slowly, but certainly. This marriage to the Ashworth family was a rescue operation. Edmund had no say in it, or was made to appear as if he had none. As for Viola, how wealthy was her family after all? A simple excuse to break the engagement. Viola's name appeared in no explanation. But the real news came 3 days later. Edmund Hale died on his wedding night. The carriage overturned. An accident, they said. Quick, sudden, painless, they said. Viola learned this from the newspaper as well. And then London's position toward Viola became clear. There would be no condolences, because Viola held no official status. She was not a wife, not even considered a fiancée anymore. The engagement had been broken, and Edmund had married another. In London's eyes, her grief did not exist. Neighbors visited Mrs. Hale to offer condolences. They showed sympathy to Catherine Ashworth Hale, the widowed bride. No one knocked on Viola's door. Weeks passed. When Viola stepped outside, people avoided her gaze, not out of pity, but discomfort. Hers was a loss that could not be named, could not be spoken. London did not know what to do with such things, so it chose to ignore them. Viola refused to be ignored. The invitation had arrived a month earlier, from the Hale family, on formal paper. Devonshire Manor, the November ball. At first, Viola had meant to throw it away. Then she read the back.
Edmund's will had been finalized. He had left something to Viola. The family would present it publicly at the ball. Viola looked at that paper for a long time. Why had the family agreed to this? Why had they not contested the will? She did not know the answer. But she knew this. This ball was her only acknowledgement, the only moment she could look London in the face and say, I was here. I existed. This grief was real. And the mourning dress, that was what it was. Not an explanation, not a defense. A strike. What had Edmund left? Why had the family remained silent? She would learn before the night ended. The grand hall of Devonshire Manor that night was, in every sense, the heart of London. The Hale family stood in one corner. Mrs. Eleanor Hale, Edmund's mother, her face severe, black lace gloves on her hands, two distant relatives beside her. Viola walked toward them, her steps measured, her gaze steady. The room watched her. Everyone watched, yet no one approached. When Mrs. Hale saw Viola, her face tightened like a drawn blade. But she said nothing. She knew about the matter of the will. The lawyers had handled it. This meeting was inevitable. Viola stopped before her and inclined her head slightly. Not respect, not even quite a greeting, merely acknowledgement. Mrs. Hale did not respond. At that moment, two women approached them. Viola recognized them, by face, by name. The kind of women London always had, never at the center, but always close to it. The first carriers of every rumor, the first witnesses to every scandal. The first, Lady Forsyth, approached with a smile. The kind where the lips curve but the eyes never warm. Miss Ashton, what a surprise! Viola did not smile. Lady Forsyth. Black suits you, Lady Forsyth said, her voice sweet, her eyes sharp. One would think you are truly in mourning. Viola said nothing.
The second woman, Mrs. Cavendish, younger, less experienced, but far less restrained, leaned forward. Not a whisper, but a tone meant to be heard. You came here to make a scene, didn't you? That's the only reason someone wears that to a ball. The room had not gone silent, but that corner had. Viola turned to Mrs. Cavendish. She did not narrow her eyes, did not raise her voice. She simply waited, as if giving the woman time to complete her thoughts. In that silence, Mrs. Cavendish grew bolder, because silence felt like permission. You came here to make a scene, she said. Her voice was lower now, but more certain. Edmund never loved you. He told his mother so. That's what everyone says. And she added, as if that were not enough, you were a convenience, Miss Ashton, nothing more. Viola's hand tightened slightly into a fist. No one saw, or chose not to. Mrs. Hale stood there, silent. That silence was no different from agreement. At that exact moment, the doors opened. James Crestwood entered. His entrance was quiet, the kind of man who does not try to draw attention, yet is noticed in every room he enters. Tall, dark hair slightly disordered, that expression on his face, tired but alert. He had returned from the war 2 months earlier, they knew. His body still carried it, still cautious, still disciplined. He scanned the room, out of habit, out of instinct, like a man who measures danger the moment he steps into any space. And he saw Viola. More precisely, he saw her face, that corner, those two women, Mrs. Hale's silence. In a single second, he read everything. Not what had happened, but what had been felt. The way Viola stood, the set of her shoulders, that stillness that had not collapsed. Lady Forsyth noticed James, and her smile changed, this time slightly real. The Duke of Crestwood, how lovely! The women dispersed, so quickly, so naturally, as if they had never been there. Mrs. Hale stepped back as well. James approached Viola. He stopped, not too close, but not distant either. Viola still stared straight ahead, at a point, at nothing. James did not speak immediately.
He waited, as if waiting for Viola to return to herself. Viola turned. She looked at him, for the first time, fully. There was no anger in her eyes, no tears, only that frozen, exhausted, proud expression. James spoke quietly. "Who are you mourning?" Viola's breath caught for a moment, because no one had asked that question. No one. Not neighbors, not relatives, not acquaintances. Everyone had either ignored it or avoided speaking Edmund's name. But this man, this stranger, had asked plainly, simply, without adding anything. "Who are you mourning?" Viola said nothing. Her voice did not come. Whether she wished it to, we do not know, but it did not. She turned and walked away, crossed the hall, turned into a side corridor, disappeared from sight. James remained where he was, watching her go. And why he had asked that question, what he had seen in Viola's face, he told no one that night.
Viola remained in the corridor for 5 minutes, alone, standing beside a wall, her hands clasped in front of her. No sound came from her. She was not crying, not speaking, nothing. She simply stood there, as if giving herself time to absorb what had just happened inside. Mrs. Cavendish's voice was still in her head. "Edmund never loved you." Not the words themselves, but the tone. That casual, certain, almost bored tone, as if she were reminding Viola of a truth everyone already knew. As if Viola's 2 years had been so obvious to everyone else that repeating it was hardly worth the effort. Viola lifted her head, straightened her shoulders. She went back inside. Mrs. Hale was waiting for her, in the same corner, in the same posture. This time she stood alone, only her and the small black envelope in her hand. Viola approached. There was a meter between them. Mrs. Hale said nothing. She extended the envelope, without a word, without a gesture, as if this moment was not easy for her either, but it had to pass, and silence was the quickest way through it. Viola looked at the envelope. It was Edmund's handwriting. On it, only one name, Viola. She had not seen that handwriting in 2 years. She had kept his letters, all of them, from the first to the last. But this was different. Heavier, somehow, slower. Edmund had known, when writing this, that he would not be there when Viola held it. Viola took the envelope, slipped it into her pocket, did not open it. The room was watching. Of course it was. They had not come here to miss this moment. Viola knew that. Just as she turned to leave, Mrs. Hale spoke. Her voice was low, low enough that only Viola could hear. "Don't read it here." Viola stopped. "You won't like what it says." Viola turned to her, looked at her face, not knowing what she was searching for. An explanation, a warning, a clue? But there was nothing there. No regret, no triumph, no pity. Only that tired, closed expression, the face of a woman who had lived too much and learned to show none of it. Viola said nothing. She turned and walked away. The night went on. The music continued. People danced, laughed, raised their glasses. Viola moved among them, almost like a ghost. Conversations brushed past her. A few people approached, brief greetings, cold politeness. Viola answered them all, dismissed them all. But her hand kept returning to her pocket. She could feel the envelope, thin, light. Edmund's last words were there, and Viola was afraid to read them. "You won't like what it says." What did that mean? Was Edmund apologizing? Explaining? Or was Mrs. Hale right? Had he never loved her, and written it in his own hand? Viola was so consumed by that question that she did not notice when she reached the garden door. The November night was cold. The garden was empty. The lights were inside. The voices were inside. Viola stopped beside a bench, took a deep breath. Cold air filled her lungs. It helped. She took the envelope out, held it, looked at it, did not open it. "You shouldn't be out here alone." Viola turned. James Crestwood stood at the garden entrance. His hands were in his pockets, his voice flat. Not a reproach, not a command, simply an observation. "Neither should you," said Viola. James gave a faint smile, not in his voice, only on his face. Fair enough. He did not go back inside. Neither did Viola. For a while they stood in silence, and strangely it was not uncomfortable. James stood a few steps from the bench, his gaze on the garden. Then they began to speak, not about Edmund. Viola did not even know how it started. The November cold of London, the difference between the air inside and outside, why people tried so hard on nights like this. Small things, meaningless things, yet somehow it was easy to talk to this man, without needing to prove anything, without performing anything. James asked, "Is this your first time at Devonshire?" "No," said Viola. "Edmund brought me once." Edmund's name slipped out. Unintentional, natural. Viola tensed for a moment, but James's expression did not change when he heard it. He only inclined his head slightly. "I knew Edmund." Viola turned sharply. "What?" "Not well," said James, his voice measured, controlled. "But enough." Viola took a step closer. "What does that mean? Enough for what?" James looked at her, with those tired, alert eyes, like a man calculating, deciding how much to say. And he said nothing. He only turned his head, looked at the garden. "It's getting colder. You should go inside." "Don't do that," said Viola. Her voice was low, but firm. "Don't say something like that and then change the subject." James paused, then looked at her, fully this time, without avoiding it. "Not tonight. Not here." Viola held his gaze for a long moment. James did not look away. Viola put the envelope back into her pocket, turned, and walked inside. James remained in the garden, in the cold, alone, his hands still in his pockets. He had known Edmund, not well, but enough. Enough for what? Viola did not sleep that night. The envelope lay on the table, unopened, Edmund's handwriting facing upward. Viola lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She closed her eyes, opened them, closed them again. An hour passed, perhaps 2. Outside, London grew quiet. The sound of carriages faded. No one remained beneath the street lamps. Viola rose, sat at the table, looked at the envelope. Mrs. Hale's voice, "You won't like what it says." But did she have to like it? Perhaps Edmund had truly written it, that he had not loved her, that she had been a convenience, everything Mrs. Cavendish had said in that calm, certain tone. Perhaps the letter was simply an ending, formal, cold, necessary. Perhaps Edmund had wanted to set everything in order before he died. Viola picked up the envelope, set it down, stood, walked to the window. London was dark. A few windows were lit, the other sleepless, the other waiting. Morning came. When the light filled the room, Viola was still at the table. She did not remember when she had sat down. The envelope was before her hands resting flat on the surface, her eyes open. Outside, a carriage passed, a door slammed. London was waking. Viola took the envelope and opened it. Edmund's handwriting inside was the same, heavy, slow, measured. He had never written quickly. He was a man who considered every word. Words mattered to him, and a wrong word was almost unthinkable. Viola began to read. The letter did not begin with an apology. Viola. Only her name, a comma. Then it continued. Edmund wrote that he had thought about writing this letter for a long time, but each time he delayed, he found an excuse. At last, the excuses had run out. He had accepted the marriage. Viola knew that. Everyone knew that. But no one had said why he had accepted it. Family debt, they had said. The Ashworth fortune would save them, they had said. All of it was true, but it was not everything.
6 months before that decision, Edmund's father had learned something about Viola's family. Not something small, something concerning an old associate of her father, something that could ruin the Ashton family if it became public. Edmund's father had used it as leverage. Either Edmund would marry the Ashworth daughter, or that information would find its way into the wrong hands. Edmund had not told Viola. He could not, because if he had, Viola would have refused. He knew her, her pride, her stubbornness. Viola would sacrifice anything to protect her family, but she would never accept someone else's sacrifice, especially not his. So Edmund had remained silent. He had married. He had not told Viola, and Viola had believed him to be the man who abandoned her, who betrayed her, who gave up on her. Edmund knew that. He had lived with it until the night of his wedding. "I loved you," Edmund had written. "I don't expect that to fix anything. I'm not telling you so you'll forgive me. I'm telling you because you deserve to know it was real." Viola had to stop. She held the page, but she could not read. Her eyes were fixed on that line. You deserve to know it was real. 2 years. For 2 years she had read those letters, remembered those walks, turned those conversations over and over in her mind, and at the end of it all she had told herself perhaps none of it had been real. Perhaps Edmund had done everything out of politeness, out of kindness, keeping her until he found someone better. Now Edmund in his own hand was telling her it was real. And Edmund was gone. Viola lowered the page, leaned forward over the table, resting her forehead in her hands. She made no sound. Whether she cried, we do not know, but if she did, there was no one in that room to see it. She remained like that for some time.
Then she lifted her head. There was another page in the letter. Edmund had continued writing, shorter now, more controlled. This part was different, less emotional, more practical, as if he had gathered himself and was saying the final thing that needed to be said. Someone else knew about that information concerning Viola's family, someone other than Edmund's father. Edmund had told him. Only one person, the only man he trusted. Because if something happened, if Edmund could no longer carry that burden, someone else had to know. The name was written there. James Crestwood. And Edmund had added, "If you ever need the truth, the full truth, not the version my family will tell you, ask him. He knows everything. I made him promise to tell you if you ever asked." Viola lowered the letter. James Crestwood. The man in the garden. I knew Edmund, not well, but enough. Enough. Now she understood what that meant. Enough to carry Edmund's secret. Enough to keep knowledge that could destroy Viola's family, and enough to stand in front of her in the garden last night, look at her face, and say nothing. James knew everything, from the very beginning. Viola found James the next morning. Crestwood's London residence was in Mayfair. Everyone knew the address. Where the Duke of Crestwood stayed was not gossip, but common knowledge. When Viola arrived, it was not yet 10, early, not an hour for a lady to call, especially alone, without a chaperone. The footman who opened the door did not know what to do when he saw her, a lady, alone, early in the morning. There was no protocol for this. Viola had not come for protocol. Tell the Duke of Crestwood, Viola Ashton, I can wait, but not for long. James received her in a small library, not the formal drawing room, perhaps intentional, perhaps not. When Viola entered, James was standing by the window, a cup of coffee in his hand, dressed informally. When he saw her, he set the cup aside.
Viola closed the door, turned. "You knew," she said. Her voice was flat. Anger always began that way in her, low and controlled. This entire time, last night in the garden, throughout the ball, you knew everything." James said nothing. "You never—" Viola stopped, took a breath. "You could have told me last night, in the garden. You didn't." "No, I didn't." "Why?" James walked to the table. He did not sit, only leaned against it, his hands on the edge, his eyes on Viola. "I gave Edmund my word, that I would not tell you while he was alive. That was the condition, Edmund's condition. If you had known, if the information about your family had surfaced, everything would have fallen apart. Edmund did not want that." "Edmund is dead," Viola said. Her voice was sharper now. "That promise should have ended." "Yes." Paused. "I know." "Then why—" "I couldn't reach you." This time, James's voice was different, not defensive, but tired, truly tired. "When Edmund died, I was still at war. I received the news 2 weeks later. By the time I returned to London, you had withdrawn completely. You were seeing no one. We had no mutual acquaintances. Edmund was the bridge between us, and the bridge was gone." Viola had not expected that. She swallowed, took a step back, physically, instinctively, as if the information had pushed her. "Why didn't you tell me last night?" "Because," James said, "in the middle of a ball, right after that scene with Mrs. Cavendish, telling you your family's secret would not have been right. You were already carrying enough—" He stopped. "Enough what?" Viola asked. Her voice had softened. James looked at her. "You were carrying enough already that night." Silence.
Viola turned toward the window. Outside, Mayfair was waking. Carriages, voices, an ordinary morning. Everything was continuing. London never stopped. "I read the letter," said Viola, her back to him. "All of it." "I know." "Why didn't Edmund tell me, at the beginning, what his father had done, why he was protecting me?" Her voice trembled on that sentence, very slightly, almost imperceptibly. "Why did he stay silent?" James did not answer immediately. He looked at her back, that upright posture, those shoulders, a woman on the edge of breaking, but refusing to break. "You knew you," James said at last. "You knew you would refuse. You would never accept his sacrifice to protect your family." Viola turned. "Of course I wouldn't." "I know. Edmund knew that too. That's why he stayed silent, and I—" Viola's voice broke here. She was not crying. Her eyes were dry, her face tense, but her voice trembled now, right at the edge of control. "I thought he was the man who abandoned me for 2 years. Even when he died, even at his funeral, I thought he was someone I hated, and—" She stopped. A breath. "He died thinking I hated him." James stepped away from the table, walked toward her, not too close, but closer. His voice lowered. "No, he didn't." Viola lifted her head. "One of Edmund's last letters was to me. I received it while I was at war. In that letter, he wrote about you, the way you looked, the things you said, the dinner where you first met. They were the words of a man in love." He paused. "He died knowing you loved him. That's not the same thing." Viola looked at James for a long moment. And then there was a knock at the door. Sharp, impatient, not the knock of a visitor, but of someone asserting a claim. James turned. Viola froze.
The door opened before the footman could intervene. The man who entered was someone Viola recognized, Richard Hale, Edmund's younger brother. In his 20s, less patient than Edmund, less thoughtful. His father's son, not Edmund's brother, but his father's son. Richard stepped inside, saw James, saw Viola, stopped. Then he smiled,
The kind of smile that never feels right. How convenient. Finding you both here makes things easier. James spoke without changing his tone. Richard. He learned something last night, said Richard. He walked into the room as if it already belonged to him. You read the letter, didn't you, Miss Ashton? Viola did not answer. You did, said Richard. You learned about your father, about what my family did. His tone was still relaxed, almost conversational. And now you're thinking of using it. Perhaps you'll go to a lawyer. Perhaps you'll tell the right people. Perhaps you want a scandal. Is that what you think? Said Viola. It doesn't matter what you think, said Richard. The smile disappeared. What matters is this. If you use that information, if you say a single word, he stepped closer to Viola, we will make sure no one in London ever receives you again. The room fell silent. Richard continued, calm, certain, that cold precision learned from his father. Your mother already keeps to herself. Your sister wishes to marry, doesn't she? A young girl in London. And London is a small city, Miss Ashton. Very small. Viola's face was stone. Richard turned to James. And you, Crestwood? Edmund told you a great deal. That puts you in a dangerous position. Keep that in mind. James had not spoken a word. He still did not. But his eyes followed Richard, that calculating, assessing gaze. Richard turned, walked to the door, paused at the threshold. Stay silent, both of you. It will be better for everyone. The door closed. The room was theirs again. Viola stood motionless, upright, her eyes on the door, her hands clenched at her sides. James watched her. Viola turned. There were no tears in her eyes now, no trembling, only that frozen, hard, proud expression, the face of a woman who had made a decision. I will not stay silent, she said.
James looked at the door for a moment. Then he turned to Viola. Something in his expression had changed. The calculating, cautious look was gone. Something else had taken its place, more direct, more open. Sit, he said. Viola sat. For the first time that morning she obeyed something, but it was not obedience, only exhaustion. After Richard's departure, the ground beneath her feet had shifted. She was still trying to find her balance. James went to the desk, opened a drawer, took out a document, folded, sealed. He placed it in front of her. Edmund's will, he said. An official copy. The lawyers prepared one for the family and one for me. Edmund left the second copy to me. The family doesn't know. Viola looked at the document. What's in it? James sat across from her on the other side of the desk. The will has two parts. The first the family knows, the distribution of the estate, the properties, the letter he left to you. The second part, he paused. In the second part, Edmund wrote what his father did, the leverage he used against your family, how he cornered you, how this marriage was forced, everything, with dates, names, details. Viola froze. He wrote that into the will? Yes. Why? James's voice lowered. Because he didn't want his father to use that leverage against anyone else after his death. If that information is weapon, he wanted to document who held it and who it should belong to. He paused. You. Viola lowered her eyes to the document. She looked at it for a long moment. Edmund had thought of everything. In life, he had remained silent, but after death, in his own hand, sealed by a lawyer, he had placed a weapon in Viola's hands. A quiet man, a quiet move. Richard doesn't know about this, said Viola. No. If he did, he would have come here very differently this morning. Yes. Viola lifted her head, looked at James. What can we do with this document? Something faint appeared on James's face, not quite a smile, but close. We don't even need to show it to Richard, he said. It's enough to tell his lawyer that such a document exists and what it contains. The Hale family won't risk a legal battle, not now, not with Edmund's death, not while the estate is being reorganized. So, said Viola slowly, we threatened them with silence. They threatened you, said James. We are simply answering. 2 days later, James's lawyer met with Richard Hale.
Viola was not there. She was not meant to be. That was the rule of the time. Women did not sit at that table, did not enter that room, did not conduct those conversations. But Viola's name stood behind every sentence spoken there. The lawyer placed the document on the table, looked at Richard, said nothing. Richard read it. His face changed. That calm, certain expression cracked for the first time. He turned the page, read again, looked at the lawyer. The lawyer was still waiting. Richard closed the document, placed it on the table, stood, left. 3 days later, a letter arrived from the Hale family's lawyer. Short, formal, cold. It stated that no objection would be made against Miss Ashton, that the will would be executed in full, and that the matter was closed. Viola read the letter, folded it, set it aside. It was over. But the ending felt strange. Viola had not expected that emptiness. For 2 years she had lost Edmund. Then she had believed she hated him. Then she had learned the truth. Then she had fought. There had always been a next step, always something ahead. Now there was nothing left to do. Edmund had truly loved her. That was known now. The family had withdrawn. Viola's name was clear, or at least not stained. What now? She saw James a week later, in the park, by chance, or so it seemed. Both were walking, both alone. Their paths crossed at one point. They walked, in silence for a while. November was still cold, but softer now. That first sharp edge had passed. James asked, "What will you do now?" Viola took a step, then another. She thought, truly thought, without rushing to produce an answer. "I don't know yet," she said, "but I'll figure it out." James inclined his head. His voice was low but clear. "I know you will." Viola looked at him. James was looking ahead. The path, the trees, the distance. But that expression was there again. Not quite a smile, but close. Viola looked ahead as well. They kept walking. Viola Ashton remained in London. She accepted the Hale family's silence, and in return left their name untouched. The second document in Edmund's will remained in a lawyer's drawer, never opened again. That was Viola's decision. She wanted to protect Edmund's name, not scandal, but silence. In the spring of 1888, Viola rented a small house, in her own name for the first time, without needing any man's permission. It was not Mayfair, a smaller district, a quieter street, but the morning sun came through the windows, and that was enough. James Crestwood moved 2 streets away. No one called it coincidence, but no one spoke of it either. London sometimes chose not to see such things, especially when the Duke of Crestwood was involved. In the autumn of 1889, they married. A small chapel, few guests, a short ceremony. Viola wore white, not pure white, but ivory. But it was not black. That mattered. There had been no formal mourning for Edmund, not the official kind, but the one within Viola. Yet that morning, on her way to the chapel, she had paused for a brief moment. Alone in the street, she had taken a breath. Then she had walked on. Some griefs do not end. They simply become something one can carry. Viola had learned that. Edmund had loved her, she had loved him, and neither had been able to say it in time. That pain remained, but it no longer held her still. James was waiting at the chapel door. Viola stepped inside.
Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Let me know in the comments which city you're watching from, and share your thoughts about the story. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.